Growing up, I didn't know wildlife conservation was a career option in my country, Zambia. But now here I am doing the work that I love most. And I'm here doing area tracking, ground tracking, and that's amazing and fulfilling to me. Our role is to protect wildlife and the ecosystems they reside in. We currently run the longest running carnivore conservation project in Zambia, and we have provided scientific information that was lacking for many of these populations. Our conservation leadership and training program is the only one of its kind in Zambia because I think we're fully committed to realizing the goal of local leadership driving the conservation agenda forward.
Please visit zambiacarnivores.org to learn more about our work and how you can help us protect carnivores and the landscapes they live in.
Hello and welcome back to Restore Our Planet podcast with me, your host, Jack Cole. So today I'm joined by Sandra Martens from the Netherlands, who's going to be talking to us about hyenas. So Sandra, welcome, and you start by telling us a little bit about your background and what it is that you do.
Sure. Hi, I'm Sandra. Thank you for having me, Jack. Nowadays I work for WWF as a conservation advisor. But before this, I have worked out in field in Zambia for about 5 years. I'll start with the start. I actually started my bachelor's in wildlife management here in the Netherlands, where I'm from, when I was 19 years old. And through my bachelor's, I got the opportunity to go to Zambia a few times for internship. And I really, really loved the conservation in the field, kind of bush lifestyle. Really felt that I could contribute something to conservation there. So eventually I actually managed to get a job in the field in Zambia in Lua Plain National Park. I was working for an organization called the Zambian Carnivore Program. This is an NGO that focuses on conservation of large carnivores of Southern Africa. So in this case, that is the lion, cheetah, wild dogs, spotted hyena, and the leopard. And I so happened to become absolutely crazy about hyenas. So I mainly focused on getting to know the spotted hyena as a species for 5 years during my work as a field ecologist. And then later I actually had the opportunity to do a master's degree in Sweden, conservation biology. And for that, I got to study hyenas even more. And so I did a study on spotted hyena demography, specifically in Lua Plain, for my master's thesis. And then after that, now I'm stuck in an office job, but I'm still very passionate about hyenas. So that is a bit of my background.
Lovely intro. So if I'm right, there are 4 types of hyena spotted around the planet. So would you mind just talking us through very briefly exactly what those are, and then move on to your real passion, which is the spotted hyena? So let's give us a bit of an overview of their ecology.
Absolutely. So there's 4 species of hyena. They kind of have a different distribution in Africa, but also in Asia. Striped hyenas are also found in Asia. But the 4 species, very briefly, are aardwolf, striped hyena, brown hyena, and spotted hyena. Now, I want to focus on spotted hyena because that's the species I know the best. Spotted hyena are basically quite broad in the niche they can occupy, which means that they do not have a very specified preference for habitat or prey or climate. So they're actually found across sub-Saharan Africa. They kind of avoid really high height and tropical rainforest, but other than that, they are found in a variety of habitats. Spotted hyenas live in groups. We call them clans, and these are kind of societies of hyenas that constantly change, because females tend to stay within the clan of their birth, but males move out of their clan. and then new males may immigrate into the clan. So the clan is a very dynamic social structure. What is interesting about hyenas is that the females generally are dominant over males. This is probably also because males leave the clan. And so, the females kind of make the rules and make sure that everyone abides to it. So spotted hyenas are born in something that we call a natal den, which is just a mother having her cubs, usually in a small den, which is a hole in the ground where she keeps her cubs for about 2 or 3 weeks. And she basically consistently nurses the cubs. She can have a litter of 1 or 2 cubs. And in very exceptional cases, they may have triplets, so that's 3 cubs. Then after the 2 or 3 weeks in the natal den, the cub is brought to what we call the communal den, which is basically where all the females that have cubs keep their cubs. So all the cubs kind of stay together in this den, and they grow up together, play together, teach each other how to be hyena, and the mothers go and forage, and then come back again to nurse the cubs. Sometimes, usually it's like in the evening or at night. Then at the age of like 1 or maybe 2, or no, always 1, sort of 9 to 12 months old, they start exploring around the den. They go further and further, start following mom, and then they slowly start like getting involved in eating of the kills and then making the kills. And then they reach adulthood. And when they are female, they'll stay in the clan, and if they're male, they'll eventually move out. I said it already, kills. Hyenas live off meat. They are carnivores. And a common misconception is that they only scavenge, but actually hyenas are very good hunters. So depending on the situation that they have to survive in, like if there's a lot of prey or if there's a lot of other predators also making kills, they can survive on pretty much anything. So whether they will have to hunt most of their diet themselves, or whether they can scavenge most of their diet for themselves, they generally pretty good at surviving of anything, even bones actually. So actually I'm going in a very nice flow because that brings me to the next topic, which is their interaction with other species. So I'm sure you've seen The Lion King, as everyone else has. From that, we all know that lions and hyenas are in very fierce competition. And whereas a lot of The Lion King, and I need to always re-emphasize this, a lot of The Lion King is complete fiction, also in biological aspect. So, clans of hyenas cannot rule over a pride of lions, stuff like that. However, lions and hyenas are a very fierce competition. So this means that they have very similar preferences as to where they want to be, what kind of prey they like to hunt, what times of day they like to hunt. So wherever lions and hyenas coexist, they are in very fierce competition with each other. So they steal each other's kill. They kind of threaten each other, and sometimes that ends up in fights. There's just a lot of back and forth between the two if they do coexist. And then the other carnivores that are, if there's any other carnivores in the same ecosystem as hyenas, they will generally not necessarily hunt the other carnivores. They are, I do think spotted hyena can be dangerous to, for example, cheetah cubs or leopard cubs. And hyenas may steal kills from other species. But the other species have generally also learned very well how to avoid hyenas and lions. So there's a very interesting dynamic in a lot of ecosystems where hyenas coexist with other carnivores, where the other carnivores are very good at avoiding hyenas, and the hyenas try if they can to, steal a kill here and there, but they don't always succeed. I'm not sure if I'm explaining that well.
No, perfectly well. Just one quick question. In terms of sort of taxonomy, what are they related to? Are they cats? What are their sort of family group?
That's a good question. Yeah, so some people say they're related to cats, some people say they're related to dogs, and the reality is they're actually none of both. So they're sort of in between. Hyenas are actually closest related to mongoose. So yeah, if you look at the sort of the how those species are, I don't know
Family
what you
tree.
call it. The family pedigree, family tree. You can see that at some point in evolution, clearly canids, so dog-like animals, and felids, cat-like animals, split, and hyenas kind of stayed with the felids for a bit, and then eventually, also kind of followed their own evolutionary path. So, if anything, they're closer related to cats, but yeah, they're definitely not a cat, not a dog. Closest related to mongoose.
And how long do they live for? And what is it usually that they die from at the end? Are they sort of vulnerable to specific types of disease, or because quite often some species have sort of specifically heart problems or joint problems, or so what is it generally that sort of gets the hyenas in the end?
Well, the biggest threat to hyenas, wherever they do coexist with lions, is actually lions. So what you see is that in that fierce competition, especially if a hyena gets, for example, older or is caught off guard and is attacked by multiple lions, that may kill them. Other than that,
Also,
yeah,
life expectancy as well. Sorry to interrupt. Sorry.
life expectancy. Well, this is difficult to say because they are very interesting in that, or like many other carnivores, a lot of them actually die at an early age, like between 6 and 8, because of the way that because of hunting and having to survive out there in the bush. But then some actually reach the age of 14, 16. Now we think we have seen one in Lua that actually turned, like, she must have been about 18 years old when she died.
Wow.
So what you see is that even though hyenas are super, super resilient, it's still often a conflict with either lions or with clan mates or another clan that may kill them as well. It can be disease, it can be injury, although at the same time, I've seen hyenas with 3 legs that are just as able to hunt as their 4-legged counterparts. And you see them lose ears and you see them like break jaws and stuff, and still they somehow survive. So, so I'd say definitely getting killed by either other species or other hyenas is the biggest threat.
Okay, and excuse me. We interviewed a lady not too long ago who was telling us about the function that vultures play in the food chain, really crucial role because as she described it, nature's a cleanup crew to preventing diseases, etc. Do hyenas fulfill a similar role, or
Yes.
is it somewhat different? And it's just as crucial.
Yeah,
in many
they're
ways.
absolutely crucial. Yeah. So, just like vultures, they're kind of the garbage men of the ecosystem. So, added benefit for those vultures as well is that obviously hyenas have very strong teeth and jaws. So the hyenas can actually, if a carcass is still intact, a hyena can make the first openings so that vultures can also get into the body cavity of the carcass. So there's only one bigger vulture, the leopard-faced vulture in southern Africa, and the hyena that sort of have that role of opening up the carcass. But yeah, it's a similar thing. They are the cleaners of the ecosystem, and by taking out those carcasses, they also clean the ecosystem of any diseases and any any sort of remaining rotting carcasses that may be left behind. So definitely a very important role there.
Fantastic. And this is sort of a very common question, as with sort of any sort of species, unfortunately, in the world these days, is regarding their relationship to humans, and sort of particularly in Africa, where there's rapid urbanization, economic growth in certain parts. How is this sort of playing into how's their relationship with humans? How's it playing into their ecology, their diets, their livelihoods? What's the situation?
So unfortunately, a hyena can be quite dangerous to humans, of course. Like what we see all over Africa and all over the world is that animals that live inside and outside protected areas, their sort of habitat is becoming smaller and smaller and more fragmented, which means that they have less space to move in, to hunt in. But also humans are actually moving closer towards the areas where they do live, where the animals do live. So in a similar way, the habitat of hyenas is getting more and more constrained. And so there is an increasing amount of conflict between humans and hyenas. So hyenas have been linked to cattle depredation, for example, especially in East Africa. But everywhere, a cow is a fairly easy prey for a hyena, and so instinctively a hyena might go for livestock and kill that, which is obviously a huge loss of income for local people. And in a similar way, I think hyenas also pose a threat to humans. They are carnivores, they're predators, they have huge teeth and jaws. And so they have actually, in the past, injured people as well. So yeah, that conflict is definitely, is there, and is also with climate change and with just changing dynamics, with a growing human population and a shrinking area available to wildlife that is unfortunately expected to increase. And what I would also like to mention is that in the area where we work, and specifically also in Zambia, a lot of poaching happens with snares. And so snares are, just to explain quickly, they're like wire nooses that hunters set to catch herbivores, but because they're so thin and they're so difficult to see and they're at kind of the perfect height, they're very indiscriminate. And so carnivores also walk into those snares and get trapped. And a snare like that will either kill an animal straight away, or it might be able to struggle free, but the wire will stay around the neck and it will keep cutting. So we've seen horrific injuries on all carnivores, but more especially hyenas in Lua Plain National Park as well. That, if you don't cut away that wire somehow, the animal will probably still die of the injury. So, and we don't even know how many actually die in the snares. So this is a huge threat to all carnivores, but also definitely to hyenas.
Something popped into my head. It's a bit of a wild question, perhaps, but given the nature of hyenas being scavengers and quite industrious animals, so there's not really any chance of them forming a sort of proto-symbiotic relationship with human settlement the way that perhaps dogs have or some other species might have. They're just too big and aggressive.
Yeah, I don't think hyenas can be tamed that easily. So a hyena is a very, destructive animal. Like, I mean, and I mean this in the most endearing way. Like they're awesome, but they have very strong jaws and very strong teeth. And this is also how how they're such successful hunters, also such successful scavengers, because they can crush bones. But in the same time, that to get those muscles to be that strong, instinctively, they'll want to chew a lot. So you see cubs are always chewing on sticks and on pieces of bone and hoof that adults come back with or throw up. And so, a hyena is, for example, always chewing. And so I have often wondered what it would be like to have a hyena cub, just, find an orphan hyena cub and hand rear it. But I think it would be disastrous, because it would just, it would just destroy everything.
Yeah, there's instincts. Yeah.
And not necessarily a human, because I do think, that they, I don't know if they would destroy a human, probably not, but I think they would destroy everything else, and I don't think they would be able to, that you would be able to tame them, and train them the way you could with a dog, for example.
Sure.
I'm not sure if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. No, as I say, it was just something that popped into the head, really, sort of imagining sort of getting along and kind of sort of edges of town and things, which I'm sure they do anyway. But okay, so you have mentioned that they usually have litters. So I forget if that's the correct word. 1 or 2 cubs. Now, in terms of their population, how are they doing in terms of what their numbers like? Are they sort of, is it a bit of a catastrophe because of human development and things growing, like we've seen with some other species, or are they generally being quite resilient? How are they with their populations, and how does that correspond to different parts of the regions where they are?
Okay, well, the answer to that is twofold. So I think, in a way, we can still say that hyenas are the most, definitely the most widespread, but also probably the most successful large carnivore in Africa.
Oh wow!
Large carnivore in Africa. But and this is because they're so resilient, right? And they're so adaptable to whatever circumstances. So this allows survival in many circumstances, and even under the current threat, they are still managing to survive better, because they can go unnoticed pretty easily. They can survive off bones if they have to. Their population at the moment, I wouldn't be able to tell you, exact numbers, but we think that the population is still relatively okay. But here's the other part. We think. We don't really know exact numbers as to what the entire hyena population is currently. We're definitely trying, and there's studies being done across Africa. But what we also notice is that because of the bad reputation that hyenas have, it is very difficult to generate funding for hyena research specifically.
Oh.
So, what you see is that, for example, we have a very good picture. We know pretty well how the lion population is doing. We know pretty well how the elephant population is doing. So all the sort of very iconic species that are also very, very important and worth conserving. We know exactly what the situation currently is, what the threats are. And so if we don't do anything, what's likely to happen in the future. But for hyenas, this is that much more difficult, because we just simply can't really do extensive enough research to actually get those numbers. So the study that I did for my master's thesis was on hyena demography, and one aspect of that was getting hyena densities over time for Lua Plain National Park. But this was based on a database that we collected, or that we worked on for 10 years. And that's 10 years of going out into the field every day, finding the carnivores, finding the animals, following them, all that kind of stuff. So it's a very, the monitoring carnivores in general but also specifically hyena is a very intensive study, if you want to do it well. And yeah, it's just, we don't really have the resources across Africa, across their range, to do it this way. So the numbers that we have are fairly patchy, but I have no doubt that, whereas there are some populations that are very stable and doing pretty well considering the circumstances, there's also, and there must be an equal amount of populations that are struggling for survival and are in conflict with humans a lot and are getting sort of pushed back or pushed away from their original range.
Okay. And Sandra, tell me a little bit more specifically about the projects that you are involved with, that you've been working on at the moment.
Yeah, so my work with the Zambian carnivore program was kind of the bulk of my hyena experience. So the Zambian carnivore program is an NGO that is based in Zambia. We work in 3 different protected areas in Zambia, across Zambia, and we basically monitor the large carnivore population in those 3 areas. And we keep extending this work as well. So we're going further and further from what originally were our base camps. So basically our work consists of monitoring the carnivore population, capacity building. So we train Zambian students and aspiring students to actually become field ecologists and to become experienced in the field of conservation. We also support any studies that they want to do. So any bachelor or master's degree or even PhD that comes out of their work with the Zambian carnivore program. We do a lot of work in the communities. So we have education projects in local schools, working with the local communities to show them the value of large carnivores for the ecosystem, and for their livelihood in the long run, and also about our work, because they see us researchers drive around with our antennae and our gear, and many people don't have any clue what we're doing and why we want to see these carnivores so badly. We also focus our studies on the prey populations of the areas that we work in, because we basically combine the data that we get from the carnivores with the data that we get for the prey. That gives us a very good overview of the ecosystem as a whole. And last, here to this multi-tiered approach, we also work on human-wildlife coexistence. So this is actually an important one for what I just mentioned as well, with the conflict, amongst others, between hyenas and humans. But in other areas, there's also, in the other areas where we work, there's also conflict between the other carnivores and humans as well. And so we have projects to help the communities deal with any wildlife conflict that they deal with. So we support the communities and try and implement new solutions as well. So that is basically the bulk of my 5-year experience in Zambia, was just working for this NGO together with all these partners, with the government, with international donors, anyone else who wanted to get involved, to together conserve or protect the large carnivores of Zambia, and therewith the entire ecosystems that we worked in. So that was sort of until 2 years ago. And then, as I briefly mentioned earlier, with my thesis, I then had the opportunity to focus more on like the research side of animal population research. And of course, mine had to focus on hyena. I wouldn't have it any other way. So for that research project, I specifically studied hyena density in Lua Plain National Park. So how many hyenas are there per square kilometer? Very briefly said, and then also survival rate. So I looked at what the survival rate for hyenas in Lua are right now, how they have changed over the years, and if they have changed over the years, and how this compares to other areas in Africa where hyena populations are being monitored. So there's only a few areas where there is as extensive research being done as in Lua Plain. So I kind of compared what I found with what has been found before on those populations. And this kind of added to not only our knowledge of the population in Lua Plain National Park, but also that sort of the gap that I was telling you about earlier, about how we know for some areas how many hyenas there are, but definitely not for every area. So my research was actually also meant to sort of fill a little bit of that knowledge gap and give estimates for an important hyena stronghold in Zambia. So that's
Really?
yeah.
And
That
something
was
that's
it.
that's something that's obviously quite clear. That Zambia, of course, means a lot to you. And I just wondered, tell me a little bit about your experience of being there on the ground and, or perhaps not to say interacting with hyenas, but sort of being around them and observing them. What really sort of what do you cherish in your
Oh,
memories?
it was my favorite thing in the world. It was I was super lucky. I literally got to do my dream job, and I will never ever take it for granted. So basically, our monitoring work, our research work is all about we have some animals collared, so two or three females per clan we have collared. So it was very important to go and visit those clans every so often, to actually do the monitoring work, because the collars give an indication as to where the animal is at certain hours of the day. Then to actually study the species and their behavior and their interactions and clan dynamics, you need to go and see them. So my favorite thing in the world was I used to go out on a motorbike early in the morning. You have all your equipment like a GPS and a receiver and an antenna to track the animals. And I'd ride out to one of the clans, and usually I would start at a den, because that is early in the morning, especially where the clan kind of comes together and they have their social interactions, and they or sometimes you'll find them still on a kill, like finishing the last bits of a kill they made overnight. And then it was all about observing and making sure that your observations were reflected on the paper, on the data sheet in front of you. So, yeah, my fondest memories are just sort of seeing it all happen right in front of me. Like, it's almost like being a fly on the wall in the hyena society, where, the den is right there, and I'd be sitting on my motorbike. If I was very lucky, I even had a cup of coffee with me in a thermo mug, and just observing all this behavior going on, like all these dynamics, all these interactions with, between cubs, but also cubs with females and clan members amongst each other, seeing who's like dominant over who is playing with who, and yeah, just all of those kind of things, like really seeing the species and getting to know them and their behavior. I think that is my fondest memories of life in the field. And I was, like, again, I've been so incredibly fortunate, because that was not a one-off thing. It wasn't a daily thing either, but it happened. I got to do it quite often, and then sometimes we got to follow them all night as well. Just drive behind a hyena that is hunting, which is just incredible. It's very difficult to put in words. I could talk about this for hours. Like, yeah, just
Magical.
being there. Like, that was just the coolest thing.
Lovely. And Sandra, of course, we're living in a rapidly changing world. Who knows what could happen? But how would you like to see things improve, or what ways could we be investing in hyenas 5 to 10 years from now that could really sort of help with their situation, improve education? What sorts of things aren't being done? So you mentioned that it's been a bit of a lack of investment in a few different ways. What else do you think you'd like to see over the next perhaps 10 to 15 years?
Well, what I would really like to see is, I've linked to the lack of investment. It is very important for all of us to acknowledge that hyenas play an integral part in ecosystems in Africa, any ecosystem, as much as the other carnivores do. Like, carnivores are keystone species, which means they have an a huge influence on the entire ecosystem. And hyenas have this influence too. And I think by acknowledging that and by looking beyond the bad reputation that they have, we can actually protect them better, but also protect humans better. So what I would really like to see is is more integrated approaches focused on the conflict between people and all carnivores, so that we can come up with solutions that have people living safely in an area, but having the carnivores live safely in that same area, and specifically hyenas as well. So, so if there's anything I could wish for right now, it's that, we really start looking at solutions on how to preserve, hyenas better, and look for ways how we can make sure that they can live alongside humans, I guess.
Lovely. And finally, Sandra, where can people find you or get in touch or support your work?
Well, that's a good question. I have a wildlife photo account on Instagram. It's called san.wild and beast, which is a reference to wildebeest. Also, I'm on LinkedIn, Sandra Martens. And you can email me if you want at sdimartens@gmail.com. So for any questions or suggestions or stories about hyenas, I always welcome them. So,
Sandra, thank you so much for your time.
thank you so much, Jack.